I know what you're all thinking. You took one look at me and went, I bet this bitch knows everything about football. I'm very sorry to disappoint, but I do in fact not know that much about the second gayest sport of all time. But Francis, what's the first gayest sport of all time? The gayest sport of all time is Turkish oil wrestling. The object of Turkish oil wrestling is to be the first to slide your hand down the pants of a freshly oiled man. Yes, this is actually a real sport, and definitely not one created as an excuse when two special friends were walked in on 4,000 years ago. No, I don't know that much about football, but I do know a lot about movies, which I hope so, considering how much money I spent on film school, and just look at me now. And the movie we'll be discussing today is the 2009 sports drama The Blind Side, and it follows the true story of Michael Oher, a talented football player who overcame his impoverished upbringing with the help of a wealthy white family, and he eventually went on to play for the NFL for a number of years. It received mixed reviews upon its release, but Sandra Bullock did win an Oscar for her performance. It has also gone down as one of the most blatant examples of the white savior complex ever represented in My Good Bitches. The name's Francis, Coke Francis. I'm an editor, comedy writer, drag artist, and I'm here because I feel I'm superior to anyone who screamed over a sport today. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that anyone who felt inspired by The Blind Side probably also felt inspired by their high school principal. It's a saccharine, patronizing cliche of a film that does nothing to celebrate or empower the young man who's the subject of the story, and everything to smugly pat the backs of the white people who took credit for it. And I hate it so much. And if you saw it and it came off as fake to you, it's because it low-key is. Even though the movie is 14 years old, it's been making headlines recently due to a massive bombshell regarding a lawsuit that Michael Oher has filed against his so-called adoptive family. And remember kids, here in the CFEU, we're all about the drama, but we're also all about the truth. And just like our friends Sinead and Paul, Michael Oher deserves better. But before we get into it, if you are a fan of watching a very tired drag queen talk about nerd shit forever, I ask that you please make a historic touchdown at a football field of your choosing. When your teammates all pick you up and go hip hip hooray or whatever the hell football players do, earn your spot in the Hall of Fame by unzipping your pants and dick slapping those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. So our main run through today is going to be a bit shorter than usual just because I want to focus on the real life aspects of the film and the recent lawsuit surrounding it, and the fact that there's already an existing review of The Blind Side that sums up my feelings about it better than I ever possibly could. We'll get to that later. But that doesn't mean we won't still watch this travesty together and roast it accordingly. So the movie opens with Sandra Bullock explaining football that is in no way helping me understand the sport any better.
From the snap of the ball to the snap of the first bone is closer to 4 seconds than 5.
You made those words up.
And right away, we meet Michael, who's introduced with a sad walk in flashbacks, and a woman repeatedly asking him if he knows what's going on. This is the first, and certainly not last, instance of this movie painting Michael as some stupid oaf for some reason, and this was exactly why he hated this movie. And also, of course, Michael is known as Big Mike, and of course, his mother is addicted to crack. And Big Tony here explains this in fluent expositionese to this white football coach. Whoa, who would have thought black people could be good at basketball? Here's a whole scene of white people sitting at a table talking about how Michael has an IQ of 80 and will never succeed at anything, which not only isn't true, but since when does IQ even actually matter, and what the hell does it have to do with sports? Have they seen today's MMA fighters? But the coach points to the sign behind them that says Christian, and maybe that will change their minds. There are also a lot of scenes exactly like this one, and I don't feel like naming every one. School is bad enough. Imagine having to read that every time you walked in there, and then having to deal with these white children judging you for your kicks. Anyway, if I was going to point out every scene where Michael is portrayed as some dumb outcast, we'd be here all day, and this wig is heavy. So let's just move on. But not before I punch a hole in my drywall for this shot of Michael's blank test with nothing but a 5-year-old's drawing of a boat on the back of it. I hate this movie so much. Oh my god. Okay, so now we meet girl boss Leanne Tuohy, played by Sandra Bullock, who looks weirdly good as a blonde, and you can't convince me that this all-white Ann Taylor Loft moment isn't symbolism.
I do love a good symbol. It's the only instrument I can play.
And at their daughter Collins's volleyball game, we meet Sean, the semi-hot dad, and Sean Jr., who answers every question like you just backed into his Tesla. But if there's one thing you know about me, it's that I love a semi-hot dad. So let's keep watching, just as Sean watches Michael clumsily pick up random bags of popcorn. So after Michael scares away a couple of white girls on the playground, SJ introduces himself and Leanne eyes him from her BMW. And then, with way too much of a smile on his face, this guy notifies Michael that his father just fell off an overpass to his death, and that's the end of that. Cut to after a Thanksgiving pageant at the school, and I don't need to point out this obnoxious white child in a Native American headdress.
I tried out for the chief, but they gave it to Andy's son. I can't be sure, but I think there's some multicultural bias thing working.
Or maybe they just thought that he'd make a better chief.
Dad, he's like Chinese.
No! No! Come on! Take it easy!
So the family sees Michael walking around in the cold, and they find out that he plans on sleeping at the gym that night. So Leanne picks him up like a lost puppy on the side of the road and allows him to stay the night at their house. Now, this is a very nice thing for them to do. Leanne seems like a nice lady. They let Michael stay for Thanksgiving the following day, and on their way to go clothes shopping, Leanne and Michael go to visit where he's actually from, which is a neighborhood that looks like it would be used satirically in the Boondocks. Oh, and then Michael's mom was evicted or something? Honestly, I'm not sure if the reason Michael never answers anybody's questions is because the writers are just hell-bent on making him look stupid, or are too lazy and or incapable of writing good dialogue and development for a person of color.
Both.
Leanne asks Michael if he wants to stay. He says he doesn't want to go anywhere else, so she gives him his own room. Cool. She learns that Michael failed a career aptitude test in the 8th grade, because who you are in the 8th grade defines who you are for the rest of your life, I should know. But he scored in the 98th percentile for protective instincts, whatever the hell that is. Slowly but surely, the teachers at the school realize that Michael isn't actually Hodor from Game of Thrones, and oh my god, is that a Borders? I remember living in these bad boys for a good portion of my childhood. Surely this won't lead to a scene like
His name was Ferdinand. All the other little bulls he lived.
I am going to become the Joker. So this is the turning point in the film where the Tuohys decide to allow Michael to call them mom and dad, and constantly pat themselves on the back for taking him in, to the point where they even talk about it when they bang.
Poor Michael's like a fly in the milk in that place.
I beg your pardon?
She did not just say that.
I beg your pardon?
So all of Leanne's family and friends are shocked and or laughing about the fact that there's a black person on their family portrait Christmas card. And when they ask if she'll adopt him, she says she's hesitant because he's almost 18, and then they ask her if it's a white guilt thing, as if these people know what white guilt or privilege actually is. Suddenly, Michael's on the football team, even though he apparently doesn't know how to play. This was the real Michael's other main issue with this movie, the idea that Leanne taught him how to play football and that this obnoxious kid trained him. In reality, he taught himself and is a naturally gifted player, and isn't fucking Hodor. But they decide, you know what, fuck it, let's just adopt him anyway because we already put ourselves down as his emergency contact and he wants a driver's license. And this is the part that's the subject of the lawsuit that Michael just filed. The fact that these were not adoption papers viewers, this was a conservatorship, but conservatorship just doesn't have that same warm and cozy ring to it, so the movie leaves that out. Don't worry, we'll talk about this at length later. So Leanne goes to visit Michael's mom, who reveals that he became a ward of the state after he was taken away from her, but he kept running back home to be with her because, wow, a young boy wants to be with his mom. Fancy that. The Tuohys buy Michael a brand new truck, and while he and SJ are jamming out to bust a move, he crashes the truck. Totals the truck, actually. They're fine, by the way. God forbid something interesting happen in this movie. You know what? I changed my mind. I don't want to bang the dad after all. I think I'm just clinging to any reason to keep watching this. Anyway, Michael plays in his first football game, and is that a button of Michael on Leanne's shirt? Fucking what? I will say though, this is probably the most invested I've ever been in a football game, but mostly just because of this racist dickhead on the other team, and I don't care who wins, I just hope he dies. Okay, so he doesn't die, but Michael comically pushes him from one end of the field to the other and then over a wall, so I'll take it. Moving on. So SJ filmed that whole thing, and I'm not sure who submitted it to the college recruiters, but they all have such a good laugh at it that they just have to have him. And I agree. This is the first time I've enjoyed any part of this movie, but in order to get into a good school, he has to get his grades up. Again. So they hire Kathy Bates to tutor him, and there's a montage of this whole parade of old white male college recruiters coming to the Tuohy home to try and recruit Michael, and all I can think of right now is the crack baby basketball episode of South Park where they demonstrate basically how college athletes are used as slaves.
I'd be willing to offer you $40 for 2 of the white ones and $50 for the blacks.
Are you referring to our student athletes?
Student athletes. Oh, that is brilliant, sir. All right, so now how do you get around not paying your slaves?
So Michael decides on University of Mississippi, or Ole Miss as the folks call it, but then he and the Tuohys are investigated by the NCAA due to suspicions that the Tuohys took him in just so that he could play for their alma mater, Ole Miss. This lady is essentially implying that the Tuohys groomed him, which, given the lawsuit that's happening now, is kind of a fair assessment if you're looking at it from the outside in, but this plants a seed in Michael's head that the Tuohys might have had different motives for taking him in. So movie here has to have a scene where Leanne asks herself if she's a good person so that the movie can be like, of course you are. Michael goes to look for his mom in his stereotype of a neighborhood. This unnamed gang leader starts making gross comments about Leanne and Collins because of course he is, and Michael puts his blindside knowledge to use by fucking annihilating everyone in this house, goddamn. After some more stereotypical flashback shots, because that's the only way we're allowed to learn anything about Michael, Leanne ventures back into the spooky neighborhood. She mouths off to this gang leader and mentions that she's a member of the NRA, which is a shame because I was finally starting to kind of like her. But she and Michael make amends outside of this laundromat. The NCAA lady finally accepts Michael's reason for wanting to go to Ole Miss. Kathy Bates fucks off, and Michael says his goodbyes to the Tuohy family over some inspirational-ish music, I guess. And then we get footage of the day the real Michael was drafted into the Baltimore Ravens. Love that for him. Good God, this movie was long. Like I said earlier, there's already an existing review of this movie that expresses my feelings in a way that's so eloquently savage that I couldn't possibly top it in a mere YouTube video. It was written for The Spectator by Deborah Ross, and Queen Deborah, wherever you are, if you ever see this, please know that I want to be you when I grow up, and I will be forever in your debt for allowing me to share this article in my video because this might be the best review of anything I've ever read. The Blind Side, or The Blind Side, as they would say in Tennessee, is so ghastly and annoying and creepy that I implore you to steer well well clear. I know, it's based on a true story. Sandra Bullock won an Oscar for her performance, and it's already made $265 million at the US box office, so why should you listen to me? No reason at all. Mostly, I don't listen to me, and I am me. But I do think you should know this. Beneath the swelling music and push-button Hallmark-style sentimentality, this film is basically about a rich, white, pleased-with-itself family who drag around a poor black boy as if he was some kind of sad old circus bear. Or, as we say in Crouch End, it's a horrible lovelies. Quite horrible. Adapted from a book by Michael Lewis and directed by John Lee Hancock, who, at film school, appears to have majored in the hackneyed reaction shot. This is the real story of Michael Oher, or at least it should be, but it actually isn't. It's the story of that rich white Christian family, the Tuohy family, who live in a swanky house, swagged curtains. You've never seen such swagging in curtains. In Memphis, and taken Michael when no one else wants him. Michael is big, black, 17, homeless, and has learning difficulties, but with the Tuohy's help, he makes it through high school and becomes an all-American college football player. Michael plays in the blindside position, whatever that is. There's quite a lot of American football in the film, and I really don't get it. Is there more to it than just these huge fellas putting on helmets, charging at each other, crashing heads, falling over, getting up and starting all over? There doesn't seem to be. I prefer ice dancing, but to each their own. Anyway, the Tuohys are Sean, a fast food franchise millionaire, and his wife Leanne. Leanne was once Sean's college cheerleading sweetheart, but is now an interior decorator, and a seemingly successful one. Obviously, the news that swagged curtains went out of fashion in 1987 or thereabouts hasn't reached Tennessee yet, and they live in that swanky swagged house with their 2 children, a teenage daughter Collins, played by Lily Collins, who must be pleased she wasn't called Collins because then she'd be Collins, and her little brother Sean Jr., the most smackable movie kid I've seen in a long time, and I say that as someone who doesn't even believe in smacking children. Why smack a child when there are so many alternatives? Why not just hang them by their ankles in the cellar instead? Now, I do like Sandra Bullock. In fact, I like her very much. I like her nose and her spirit. I like her despite the terrible rom-coms for which she earns $25 million a pop, God bless her. But her performance as Leanne is hardly Oscar-worthy. It's not even a stretch. This is the sort of thing Meryl Streep could knock out before breakfast and perhaps even while brushing her teeth. Leanne just has to look hot at all times while being sassy and bossy and putting her snooty friends in their place, employing cliche after cliche to do so. Seriously, if there's a Clichés R Us on some ring road in Memphis, then Leanne emptied it. Okay, here's a little quiz for you. When one of Leanne's snooty friends says to her,
"Honey, you're changing that boy's life,"
what does Leanne say in return? Is it A, true dat, because she's been watching a lot of The Wire lately? Or B, what, swagging's out? Since when? Or C,
No, he's changing mine.
if you answered A or B, then I can only say, I wish, but of course it was C. And although not meant ironically, it is ironic all the same as Leanne goes on no journey whatsoever. And Michael? Michael doesn't really figure in all this. Michael's a big Hulk, but he's also a big empty husk. His present inner life is anyone's guess, pretty much. His past life, meanwhile, is shown in brief flashbacks that peddle every black stereotype going. Michael is not a character, but a mirror in which the Tuohys can further admire themselves. This is a horror film, and I hated it, and while I suppose you can't argue with a true story, you can always argue with the way it is told. Steer well clear, but if you can't, don't come running to me. You will find no sympathy around my house. None at all. Now, this review is written upon the film's initial release, which leads me to her last statement. You can't argue with a true story, but you can argue with the way that it's told, which is 1000% true. But it turns out The Blind Side goes beyond that. The true aspects are not only questionable at best, but given the recent allegations against it that have been surfacing, it was downright harmful. And Detective Francis is on the case. Now, before we do anything else, I want to bring attention to the fact that after all of this happened, a lot of hate has been directed at Sandra Bullock for some reason, because the internet is stupid. So let me be abundantly clear. This has nothing to do with Sandra, and all of this hate and backlash against her is totally unwarranted. I think she just also lost her partner or something, and she's going through a really tough time right now, so please don't send any hate towards her. Leave Sandra alone. Thank you. So Michael Oher filed a lawsuit against the Tuohy family that alleges that he was not legally adopted as the film suggests. When he signed an agreement at age 18 that he believed were adoption papers, he was instead placed under conservatorship unbeknownst to him. Remember what happened with our Queen Brittany? Same shit here. Michael claims that the conservatorship gave away his rights to sign contracts and make educational and medical decisions. And according to the lawsuit, the Tuohys made millions of dollars after The Blind Side while Michael received nothing. Yes, all this from the family who supposedly told him to call them mom and dad when he entered their home. The lawsuit alleges that the Tuohy family negotiated the rights with 20th Century Fox, each receiving $225K plus 2.5% of all future profits. The Blind Side grossed a grand total of $330 million. As expected, the Tuohy family was disappointed to hear this, and with their sweet fast food franchise money, they hired the best lawyers to write the most scathing responses possible, even implying that Michael intended to essentially blackmailing them by planting a negative story about them unless they paid him $15 million. The Tuohys said that they were upfront with Michael about the agreement and that they gave him, quote, an equal cut of every penny received from The Blind Side. They also said they have no issues with Michael ending his conservatorship and that they are heartbroken. But there are a few things about this that Detective Francis here noticed, and the Tuohys and their probably endless stream of lawyers have yet to explain them. 1. If they claim to have no issue with Michael ending the conservatorship, that alone confirms that they're still aware that it somehow still exists. Why didn't any of them think to end it once Michael entered adulthood and had a successful football career? Did they just forget or something? And 2, Tennessee law states that someone has to have a disability or incapacity of some kind in order to be granted a conservatorship and prove a need for supervision in court of law. However, even though The Blind Side loves to imply that Michael had the mental capacity of a teaspoon, he has consistently shown no signs of a physical or mental disability at any point in his life. So how the fuck was the conservatorship even granted in the first place? Sean Tuohy stated that the lawyers he spoke to at the time of the adoption said that he couldn't adopt someone over the age of 18, so they had to settle for a conservatorship. But here's what Detective Francis found regarding that statement. Most states do not allow adoptions for people over the age of 18. However, in the state of Tennessee, coincidentally where all these people are from, adoptions are legal regardless of a person's age, including over 18. Now, usually adult adoptions are done more symbolically than anything, but the adoptee is still granted full rights to inherit directly from the estate. Can I get another detective hat, please? Thank you. Now, circling back to Michael's claim that the Tuohys made millions off The Blind Side and his name and likeness while he himself received nothing, or as nerds like to call it, the business side of the equation. The lawsuit inevitably caught the attention of Alcon Entertainment, the studio that produced The Blind Side. In a statement that was supposedly written by co-CEOs Broderick Johnson and Andre Kosov, but painfully obviously written by an overpaid PR team, they spake thus. We feel it is now important for us to respond to some recent media reports which include many mischaracterizations and uninformed opinions. The impetus for these stories has been a lawsuit by Michael Oher, which seems to have given critics and journalists alike a justification to unfairly pick apart the movie 14 years later, some going so far as to call it fake or a lie. The notion that the Tuohys were paid millions of dollars by Alcon to the detriment of Michael Oher is false. In fact, Alcon has paid approximately $767K to the talent agency that represents the Tuohy family and Michael Oher, who presumably took commission before passing it through. We anticipate that the Tuohy family and Michael Oher will receive additional profits as audiences continue to enjoy this true story in the years to come. Goodness knows. knows? The two of us are hardly correct all the time, but we sure were right about our decision to make this film. In the story of The Blind Side, we saw the better angels of human nature. They also mentioned that they made a donation to the Tuohy's Family Foundation in addition to those 6 figures, and a similar offer was made to Michael as well, for a charity of his choosing, rather than just, like, you know, paying him.
Now, when we sell their likeness for video games, how do we get around paying for our slave student athletes then?
He declined this offer. So once again, here are a few things that Detective Francis noticed. 1. Let's say those 6 figures Alcon gave us were accurate, and give them the benefit of the doubt. Why should we? That alone is not the millions Michael had claimed this is true. I'm not gonna make an ass out of myself by doing the math because I can't do math, and I have no problem admitting that to all of you, and I don't care enough to obtain copies of their financial records because I'm not a fucking nerd. But the film did gross $330 million, and they were granted a small percentage of all future profits. Do with that information what you will. 2. Their presumption that Michael took commission is false, since he was still under the conservatorship and therefore would not have access to those funds. 3. The Tuohy's Family Foundation is called Making It Happen, and their mission statement is helping to prevent kids from falling through the cracks of society, which is a nice idea that's also wildly vague. But hey, I'm never going to shit on people trying to help kids in need if what they're doing is genuine. And if they have actually helped other kids like Michael, that's rad. But, there's always a big but, the New York Times has reported that while Making It Happen has brought in over $1 million in donations over the past decade or so, the foundation has actually spent less than 20% of its total received donations on charitable efforts. 4. I dug a bit deeper and found that Alcon Entertainment is financed by Frederick Smith, the founder of FedEx and a neighbor of the Tuohys, and whose son Canon is married to Collins Tuohy. Canon. Imagine naming your child Canon. That way when people are like, dude, is that actually your name? He can be like, yeah, and that's Canon. Obviously, and for legal reasons, this is all just speculation based on the facts that are publicly available. And most importantly, I'm a drag queen on YouTube, not a lawyer. But what leads me to side with Michael on this is that given the evidence over the years, I doubt that this is actually money motivated. According to Spot Track, Michael earned over $34 million during his NFL career, playing for the Baltimore Ravens, Tennessee Titans, and Carolina Panthers. That is nothing to sneeze at, and we are happy for him. He signed the conservator contract in 2004, The Blind Side book came out in 2006, the movie came out in 2009, and Michael published his own book in 2011. And in the book, there is seemingly no ill will directed towards the Tuohy family. His only complaint is, once again, the way that he was portrayed in the movie. But regarding the family themselves, he expresses nothing but the utmost respect for them. Cut to 2023 when Michael finds out about the conservatorship in February and files the lawsuit in August. Given his multi-million-dollar NFL career over the past 2 decades, it's highly unlikely that he's doing this for a quick buck. And for him to do almost a complete 180 on his adoptive family in such a short amount of time leads me to believe that this isn't a money issue, it's an issue of trust and respect. It's the fact that when Michael was a young man, the people he looked up to convinced him to unwittingly sign something that he was unaware of the repercussions from, never told him about it, profited off a movie that not only wouldn't exist without him, but portrayed him in a way that was false and demeaning, while the Tuohys were portrayed as modern saints with a southern twang. It's easy to think that Michael wrote this book just because he was unhappy with how he was portrayed in the movie, but in reality he only mentions mentions it in like 2 paragraphs. The title of the book is I Beat the Odds, and his main goal with publishing the book was to inspire kids who were born disadvantaged as he was, and that there's more to escaping a life of poverty than just waiting to be adopted by a rich white family. It wasn't just the Tuohys that helped him, it was his friends, family, siblings, tutors, social workers, a lot of fucking people. And I know plenty of you will be like, gasp, but Francis, these people took this boy in out of the goodness of their hearts. They helped him get to where he is today. Yes, that's true. It never wasn't true. Michael stated that himself. You can be helped and get dicked over by the same people at different times in different ways. I don't believe any part of this was part of like a grand money-making scheme or conspiracy or whatever. I don't think the Tuohys are scam artists per se, even though Leanne charges $30K pop for motivational speeches. I hope everything works out for these people, and I'm not sure why I wanted to talk about it, but given my recent video on Sinead and Paul and how they deserve better, if these allegations are true, then so does Michael Oher. Anyway, thanks for hanging in there for a lot of legalese and a movie that was genuinely painful to sit through. So here's a nice change of pace with the winning comment from the last video. Jeremy Pletz 4955 says, I'm showing my age here, but I popped big time for the Siskel and Ebert impressions. I just love making references to things that other people love to tell me I'm too young to remember. You too can be featured in the next video. Leave a comment below, and I will pick my favorite one and give you a shout out next time. If you would like to see more of my clown mug elsewhere, please consider following me on Instagram or TikTok. My handle for both is at Queen Coke Francis. If you would like to watch me bully racists, homophobes, and transphobes in 240 characters or less, follow me on Twitter at Real Coke Francis. If you haven't done this already, I ask that you please make a historic touchdown at a football field of your choosing. When your teammates all pick you up and go hip hip hooray or whatever the hell football players do, earn your spot in the Hall of Fame by unzipping your pants and dick slapping those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. And of course, as always, until next time,